Thanks, listeners, for joining us for Elko Live today here on KELK. We're sitting down in advance this week to accommodate some travel schedules, and I'm very pleased to feature our local law enforcement program here on Elko Live. We have our City Police Chief, Tyler Trouten, alongside our Elko County Sheriff, Aitor Narvaiza. Welcome, Chief. Great to see you.
Thank you, Lori.
And welcome, Aitor.
Thanks, Lori. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, Sheriff Narvaiza. And we, as always, have a lot of topics to get to. And I think the one that's weighing the most heavily on the community right now is something that there's really not a lot to update, but at least it is the reality that we had a very tragic event in our community. We had a murder-suicide last week, and I guess, Chief, I might let you take the lead on it since it really unfolded within city limits, even though I know it involved a joint response.
Yeah, so I think everybody's aware by now, but if not, shortly before 8 o'clock last Thursday, a subject who was, as I understand it, going to be terminated from his employment at Sterling Crane walked in the office and had a gun. Somewhat of a targeted incident in that there were other employees there. They were not harmed physically, however, went into the office of Bob DeMars and killed him. And I know a lot of the community knows Bob, great individual. A lot of us knew him, had business dealings with him or just, associations with him and his wife Angie and their family, good folks. Then the subject, Mr. Jower, went over to the Peace Park and basically prepared some thoughts on paper and took his own life. Kind of a tense situation because as officers arrived the area, in fact, the first ones at the park were deputies who just happened to be driving by and then realized there was a little bit of misinformation on the vehicle the suspect was in and that was indeed the vehicle. Flipped around, heard the shot go off. They believe it went over their heads, which is a possibility. But then not knowing where the suspect was, what his condition was, we had to put essentially a whole area around the Peace Park into lockdown, the state buildings, different things like that. It was also pushed out to schools in the area. I know the college, I think you were up at the college, in fact, Lori. Several things till we could make sure that the threat was mitigated and no future threat to the folks. But appreciate the community's assistance in that. I know it's a huge inconvenience and creates a lot of concerns and fears. Once again, stress out to the public that if you do not have the Elko Police Department app or the Elko County Sheriff's Office, I would recommend both, you need to get them on your phones. We still have a few ankle biters in the community, always worried about, they can't hear what's going on the radio. There's a lot of reason for that. I think we've covered them ad nauseum here on previous shows before. If you want to know what's going on and what you need to be aware of, you need to have those apps. That is one of the primary ways we use to communicate with the public because we can do it in mass. So would again encourage people to get that. Some of the issues there is when people don't know, like at the park, we had residents trying to come out their backyard and walk into the park just to see what's going on, which had this been a little different, the subject's still at large, still trying to do harm, they could put themselves in significant risk. I know Sparks just had an incident where a couple of their officers got shot, where starts as a traffic stop, the subject bails out, basically kind of kidnaps another resident, makes them drive him to another location in a car, forces his way into a home. It is difficult, and there's multiple things going on at one time, hence why we use a single point that we can push out messages and do our best to inform the public, but we need the public to meet us halfway. Get that app on your phone.
Thanks, Chief, obviously. Yeah, it did involve the community, as you said. It was a very tense time in that brief, but safety first. I mean, that's what the officer's initial reaction and response was. They could not possibly have known, not being able to see the individual, the suspect, that he was at that point already down.
Well, and even looking at that area, there's 1,000 places to hide. I mean, even just the natural vegetation, the sagebrush allows a person to hide and stay low. There's a pretty deep ditch that, when it's not full of water, is a great place to hide, different things like that. One of the positive things come out of this, like so many of our critical incidents, we had the Sheriff's Office involved and Nevada State Police involved, even a couple of the Nevada Department of Wildlife officers, BIA officer. Things like this happen. Of course, we always have, city, county, fire, ambulance, those folks participating. So that was a positive out of it. And in large part, I just received a thank you this morning from one of the community members who, they work at a location quite a ways distance from where both scenes were. However, grateful that because they had it on their phone, they got the alert and knew what was going on. And that allows them to, determine maybe we need to do something at our location.
Mm-hmm. And you can get help downloading those apps, by the way, wherever you've your services, where you've purchased your phone. And Sheriff, I know that this also impacted your department, not only just in response, but the suspect and also deceased in this murder-suicide. Bob DeMars was a victim. He was 50 years old. As you mentioned, left a loving family, children, and also Josh Jower, who was the shooter, and then the deceased taking his own life, 42 years old. He was well known to the sheriff's office. He was part of your search and rescue. Is that right, Aitor?
Yeah. It's this whole thing is just, when I heard it was Bob that was killed, and then when I was told about who shot him, it was pretty tough to take, on both parts. My boy's pretty tight with Bob's son, and so we spends a lot of time at our house, and he got search and rescue, and it's just one of those things that it's just tough. It's to take a life for such a no nonsense reason. It's just it's hard to take. I mean, we, Chief and I know the both individuals, and when you get a call this way, you're like, your stomach kind of drops. So when it happens, and then when you find out the other part of it, it's just like, wow, you just can't believe it, and it's a tough thing because you got two families. One lost their husband and father, and then Josh was a father as well too. So you got two families that are now, going through some hard times, and it's a really hard thing to do.
And the the type of violence, again, using a handgun, instant, obviously regrettable. You mentioned he left a note, so there was clearly no doubt, what had transpired in that brief time in which those families, have been, there's just no way to fix the pain and the suffering. And Sheriff, you said that we are on a track this year. We are approaching possibly a record number of recorded deaths for the county.
Yeah, last year we had about 180 deaths total, and right this year, as of today, we're already sitting at 60. So here we are 4 months into it, so we're averaging about 15 bodies, unnatural to homicide to overdoses and suicides, I believe we got, I just had those numbers here, but it's 60 deaths, and I believe it was seven suicides and 6 overdoses already for the year. So it's we were really going up. A lot of them more natural, but still, they're our coroners have been really busy with them. Like the other day, we had 3. So I give those guys kudos. They're up all day doing all this, and we keep going. We're going to be well over 200 bodies, about 220, 230, the way we keep going this year.
And these deaths, obviously, other than the natural deaths, they are investigated. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Some of them are the suicides, the overdoses are all sent to autopsy. The natural deaths, usually we get the doctor to write off on them because, some pass away in the hospital, but we still have to do is the coroner duties and do the next of kin and do the paperwork. And so if it's a natural, the doctor's really good about signing off on it, but anything else, it's all investigated, through the ME's office in Reno.
And I think that's probably something the public's not very well acquainted with. We recently had a suicide off Opal Drive, and a lot of residents concerned because it looked like a murder scene, essentially, in the way that police arrived, tape it off, doing all these things. Trying to explain to people that if we come across a body in a non-natural death, we're absolutely treating it as a homicide until we can firmly say and unequivocally say, no, it's a suicide. But I know that caused some fears and concerns over there. And again, for law enforcement, that's standard operating procedure. But again, the public, they don't know that. They're used to the TV versions, I'm sure. So.
And we're going to talk about this too, obviously about the resources that it takes, and if that's something that Elko needs to think about for the very near future, if this is a trend that we're continuing. But Chief, I did want to allow you and both the sheriff regarding the murder-suicide, that if an employer is in a predicament or is facing, say, this situation where someone was about to be fired, if they have concerns, can they contact law enforcement in advance? I mean, what's the best way to handle this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, multitudes of ways of doing this, and we've done this several times over the years where there's an employee that has maybe expressed verbal threats or just has a really hot temper and known to kind of explode and yell and scream. If there's that concern of violence, you can call. We've oftentimes went and did basically like a civil standby. Standby while the paperwork's delivered, equipment's returned, whatever that may be. Again, this is a huge price this community's had to pay for something that, perhaps there's a chance could have been avoided. And I think more and more we see across the country, here locally as well, people just, I think they kind of get in a course, maybe a mind loop where that's all they can consider, and they're intent on doing violence no matter what. In this case, a termination, it certainly shouldn't be a life-ending type of event. It might be a life-altering type of event. So yeah, businesses, if you have those concerns, you need to let an employee go and you're concerned about that, please reach out. There are safe ways to do this and, try to mitigate those threats. The other thing is, again, plead to the entirety of the community. Somebody's going through some difficult times and, whatever it may be, we have mental health resources here. We have several different providers that maybe can work on this, beforehand so that you actually help these people and we never get to this point, never even get to the point where it's a concern. And again, throughout there is a lot of mental illness in this community. A lot of it is tied in directly to the drugs. Those are both seem to be recurring factors in the large majority of every crime we deal with.
Thank you, Chief Ty Trouten. Of course, if you need that civil standby, you can call the non-emergency number. Obviously, if something is escalated, you would call 911 to get an immediate response. But that's in both the city and the county, right, Sheriff?
That's correct. Chief Trouten is absolutely correct. If you have an issue with, a tenant or a job employee, feel free to call our central dispatch and we can get a deputy or a police officer out there to do a civil standby and make sure everything goes well. Because we do them all the time, And we usually do them like divorce and custody exchanges where they have that potential to go south, So we do them all the time. So it's not that big a deal for us to go out there and stand by. We're not going to sit there and, make sure you pack all your belongings. We're not going to be there for hours and hours. We're going to give you the essentials, some clothing, your toothbrush, toothpaste, that kind of stuff. It should take 15, 20 minutes, and then everybody goes their own way. But please feel free to call us.
All right. That's in the event of a civil standby. Talking with our Sheriff, Aitor Narvaiza, and our City Police Chief, Tyler Trouten. And there was another topic that, too, we wanted to follow up on, Chief, also an incident related to last October. I believe he was 26-year-old man, Eric Kabibi, died of a fentanyl overdose found in a public park here in the community. And our district attorney has taken that right up, and now someone's being charged with dealing those drugs.
Yeah, thank goodness for Tyler Ingram, because he is very adamant about wanting to, in all cases where it's possible, identify who provided those drugs to the deceased and prosecuting them for second-degree murder, which is great. That needs to happen. These drug dealers, they really don't care what it is they're pumping out to the community. They have no ability to state what the potency might be of those drugs and so forth, and we have a lot of overdoses.
We've had 6 overdose deaths this year.
Just this year, and yet I would say that the number of overdose calls where Narcan's administered and the person recovers, those are sometimes multiple calls per day, maybe some days only one or two, but there are a lot just in the city of Elko, and I'm sure the sheriff's dealing with the same thing in the county. That doesn't include the number of times when an associate of the person who's overdosed or their family is administering Narcan that we don't even get called on. This happens a lot, and it is very frequent. I don't even know how you would get an accurate count of how many overdoses actually are occurring, because some folks even refuse to go to the hospital afterwards. So there's not really a mechanism to track how many are actually occurring, but it is significant. In this case, we were able to identify the person who provided those drugs, Rocky Salazar. It took several months to get the toxicology reports back to confirm that the cause of death was indeed fentanyl overdose. Once we got that, got the search warrant, Mr. Salazar was already in custody down at the sheriff's jail, and so he had the additional charge added to him there Thursday evening. So.
Okay, so that's Tyler Ingram. His message is, if you're dealing drugs and someone is overdosed or died as a result of that, then there's a responsibility there.
Chief Trouten and I were at a meeting the other day where Tyler was there, and Tyler made it very clear to us he will prosecute these drug dealers if there's death involved, and dealers itself. But if there's a death involved, he will go after you. And he made that very clear at our meeting last Thursday or Wednesday. So good for him.
Well, and Elko has a history of this through the district attorney's office. The first one I'm aware of was Jennifer Williams overdosed on OxyContin. And the provider of those pills, I'm not sure if he's even out of prison yet. I went in there. So, it is certainly a viable process. And, and again, just would admonish people, be careful. We've talked about there's, again, new drugs coming out, xylylene, for which Narcan does not work. We know it's hit Salt Lake, Reno, and Vegas already. It will be here before long. And again, there's no way for a user of drugs to know this. Probably not necessarily even a way for the dealer of the drugs to know this, but Are these pills in pill form? I mean, so that family members can look at you. Someone's just handed you a pill and you take it, and you could die. Correct. Could be in powder form, could be in pill form, and you don't know. So many of these dealers are making faux pills, so they have a stamp. It would look like a legitimate prescription or over-the-counter pill, and no way to quantify how much of fentanyl or any other drug is in there, whether there's any, whether it's all binder, or whether it's nothing but. There's no way to know by visually looking at it.
Okay.
It's kind of funny, we're talking about this, Ty mentioned it, but I was in the cell blocks today talking to the inmates, and there's one particular block I was in this morning. We were talking about overdoses and fentanyl, and I asked them why do it if you have a 50-50 chance? And they said, just cause. And it's like, that's not a very good answer. Just cause is not going to cut it. But I talked to the inmates, and they were like, well, I screwed up. I just got out of prison, and I tried fentanyl, or one's in there for cocaine use. And but when we were talking about it, like Chief said, now they got this new drug, and it's like, why are you going to do it if you might not even wake up? And like, just what we do. And it's like, that's not a very good answer.
And it is happening, obviously. And that's why these discussions are important, especially for younger people who are deciding to try something, for the first time. We know we have graduation coming up. There are parties. Students might be feeling like they're on the top of the world, and they have no concept of the risk or the gamble they could be taking.
Well, not just the risk and the gamble of an overdose, but also just of addiction. Some of these pills, they have addiction rates of 99%. I mean, if you were to pick something up and know that, hey, 99 times out of 100, I'm going to become addicted to this, and that's going to forever change my life, you'd probably run away from it. However, once that addiction has taken hold, kind of as the sheriff's describing, people oftentimes are almost helpless to battle it. It requires a lot of help and effort, not just from them, but also from outside resources, whether that's going through a program or inpatient facility. But that is the driving thing. I think people who do not or have not experienced addiction would look at it and go, geez, if you overdose and you're saved, it should be an epiphany, a life-changing moment. For many of these folks, it is not. It is just part of their routine activities day by day, week by week.
That's the power of addiction that we're talking about.
Yeah, I talked to that inmate today, and he was telling me the reason he violated his probation here a couple of weeks ago because he said one of his friends was released from our custody, and that weekend he committed suicide. So his way of dealing with it was getting back on the drugs, and that cost him a violation, and he's looking possibly going to prison. But, so you got suicide, you got drugs. It's just a bad thing, and it's tough to get your hands around it. There's so much of it,
Mm-hmm. At least from the perspective of these two gentlemen, certainly in law enforcement, our city police chief and sheriff, because that's your business. It's every day, day in and day out. And I feel badly when you leave the program, and I feel like maybe some listeners think it's all doom and gloom. There are some really good things happening and good programs and people being recognized for good work, Chief, including your department.
Absolutely there are. And I guess to put positive spin on some of these things as well, this city, the county, our community has never been as well poised as they are now for dealing with, whether it's mental health issues or addictions or both of them at the same time. So there are more resources and stuff. Getting back to, our younger generations, those preparing to graduate in high school and stuff, really the best course of action is, I would recommend to them, figure out what it is you want in life and then don't do anything that would compromise that. I always told my kids, don't pick something up that you can't put down. You may think that you're in control of this, and maybe you are for a few times or maybe just one time, and then it takes control of you. It's very painful to see over the years. I don't know how many of our youth that have had very promising futures. You think, man, this is somebody who's going to go somewhere, be it athletics or academics or whatever it is, just good people. And they end up succumbing to addiction and, the crime that goes along with it. And really their life is just completely thrown off track.
We see business people that have businesses lose their whole businesses because of drug addiction. We've seen them go through divorce. We've seen them go totally bankruptcy to living out on the street because of a drug.
And losing their children.
Yeah, and they lose the children in court. Once that gets a hold of you, you're pretty much done. It's tough to get off of it, but what it comes back to is everybody gets off of it and they do well, and then they come back, or they, like if they leave the jail and they're sober, and the first thing they do is go and get back with their friends and try it again, and they OD, and it's sad, Because I have conversations with inmates all the time about this kind of stuff, and I've had the commissioners in there and talked about it, and they just tell them it's just what we do, and it's not a good answer. I don't know where to start,
Well, and speaking of commissioners, our Elko County Health Board meeting was last week, and just as you mentioned, Chief Trouten and Sheriff Narvaiza, there's a lot of concerted effort now to making sure that we have these mental health services. The hospital is going to be working soon on
breaking on, what they say, I believe 25 beds facility.
Behavioral health inpatient facility on the third floor.
That's going to be nice. That's going to be really good for the city and the town of county of Elko. It's going to be pretty solid.
And we do know both of our agencies participate in Committee Against Domestic Violence, which has been a volunteer organization, Chief, and we know that there are, now other organizations coming together to realize this problem, because when you conduct a lethality assessment, we had Amber Huff on the program just last week, and and she talked about the seriousness of this, of people in peril, and they don't even recognize the signs of where they're living and what their children are going through.
Dealing with kids, we see it all the time. I had an individual just the other day. He was just angry at the world for his what he's got going on at home, family life. He's angry. To him, it's just a natural, just a regular day, and that it shouldn't be like that, So these kids do need some help, and we got to get these kids on board.
We hear good things from our juvenile probation department, right? That's why we don't talk about them a lot, because they're actually in there doing a lot of things to lift up young people and connecting with these resources.
They absolutely are, Lori. And, one of the things, and unfortunately for a lot of people, they have not had the life experiences to teach them or prepare them. But we see a lot of domestics, family violence, not just against partners, but against other family members, because people do not know how to deal with anger. They do not understand that, they have the power and control to determine how they react to things. They just go with what naturally occurs, and again, can get them into trouble very quickly, because there are some pretty significant domestic violence laws out there. You can end up being a felon if you have a pattern of behavior on this. But one of the other things you'd mentioned, the victims and the difficulty in getting out of these situations. You can even talk about, or as we just discussed, the difficulties when you lose a job. Someone is fired. That is a life-changing event. It can be, good in the end and lead you to something better. It can lead you to something worse. But it's kind of the same for victims of domestic violence, because their whole life, their entire model that they're operating under has changed. Of course, then you throw in the emotional feelings of, at least at one point, there was love between these, partners, that, love, respect, all those things, and how difficult it is to understand that that person could, in fact, be the one going to kill them. It's a hard thing to admit. I mean, we see these lethality assessments come in, and people are at the very top of it in extreme danger, and are still reticent to take action. They think that it's going to get better on their own. And like most things in life, I mean, things don't get better on their own. You hear a noise coming out of your car engine, you probably want to get it checked, because it will at some point, kill the engine for you, or, leave you stranded. It's the same thing in relationships. Especially once it hits the physical level, without some intervention, without something changing significantly, it is only going to continue and get worse. And as law enforcement, we see that time and time and time again. One of the biggest benefits of that lethality assessment is it's not just us saying, hey, we think you're in danger. This is a long-term study showing these are severe indicators of essentially lethal threats to the victim, and try to help them understand this is serious. This isn't just, they got upset and lost their temper, or, they were drinking, or, it was a bad day. It is much beyond that.
Mm-hmm. It's a pattern. And that assessment was developed from the reality of victims who did lose their lives. They were able to go in and study and then create this assessment. So Sheriff and Chief, and I want to be able to leave you both with this idea, if someone is concerned, and they, just like about a suicide, if you need to remove lethal means from the home, right, Sheriff? And there is a means to do that, right?
Yeah,
I think
we've done it. We can talk to family members, or we take those guns and rifles out of the residents' hands. We put them in the sheriff's office, and we put them under safekeeping. And then when that individual feels he's getting better, we can give him back, but we do take those guns from him. We've had family members bring us rifles or guns that are subject suicidal, and we've actually been on the house and we've taken guns because they're willingly, and we give them up, and we put them in safekeeping, and they can get them 6-7 months later, and we give them back to them.
And that's also in the city, right, Chief?
Absolutely, and not just on the suicidal, trying to remove lethal means, but this extends across the board. I think most folks have heard of the red flag laws. When you have these concerns about people, and I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter, I understand that side of the argument, but I would throw it out to the community now. If you had the means, if you had the ability to prohibit or prevent something like just happened last Thursday, to what length would you be willing to go? Would you be willing to stand up and say, hey, I think this person needs some help, and right now we need to do what we can to just make things static and prevent harm? It is not a permanent thing. In fact, the last legislature even strengthened the rights of basically the person who is red flagged, and having representation and so forth, so that it does meet constitutional standards. They always want to know, why didn't anybody stop the school shooting? Why didn't anybody stop this, stop that? You can't stop something if you don't know about it, and then when knowing about it, to stand up and share what you know, make sure that the authorities know, and that steps can be taken. There's 2 families now in our community directly impacted by last week's events. Never be the same. It's never going to be all right. It's not going to be, something we can just move on with. how far would you have been willing to go if we could have prohibited that? If somebody would have stepped up and said, hey, I don't know why, but I think this person's, needs some help. Could we have had, an opportunity to change the events? I know Lieutenant Fisher was talking about he just had a conversation the day before with our suspect, but did not know of all the rest of the things going on. It was pursuant to, a role within the sheriff's office. We have to know these things, and, unfortunately, we're tens of law enforcement officers in a community of thousands. We cannot know everything going on. We need the community to assist us in that.
And the chief's very, very right on that. If we could stop something, and it needs to be stopped, people have the right to have guns, but if we can stop a bad situation from happening, get law enforcement involved, we're willing to do that. I mean, we'd be there more than, it's a sad thing. Like Chief said, everybody likes their guns, but if you can stop a situation and we can get involved and take those guns away from you, we're there, whether we have to get a court order or just go in there and get the family, get them out.
So have confidence and trust. Trust your gut. Trust your instinct. Just do the right thing. This isn't a political statement. It's just about, safety and security. And guns should be in the right hands, not in the wrong hands.
You're absolutely right. Where everybody's entitled to have them, but there comes a lot of responsibility with those firearms as well. There's laws and there's rules, and just be safe. Think what you're doing before you act. It just goes back to that. Just gotta think. And people need help, give them some help. Let us know, or let that individual know.
Well, I'd almost liken it to the incidents of road rage, where you get the crazy driver trying to run somebody off the road, different things. The people who witness that or are affected by it are generally saying that person shouldn't have a license. And in that moment, in those circumstances, they're correct. You can't have that on our highways and stuff. This is a similar thing, and I guess people get very concerned because they perceive it as attack on your Second Amendment rights. But really what it's aimed to do is to ensure that, at least in the moment, and for the betterment of that person, we don't end up in something that's permanent, something that's a huge tragedy, be it a suicide or a homicide or whatever it may be. You're trying to make things static. We're humans. We all deal with different things. As the saying goes, everybody needs a little help sometimes. That's true. It's not a permanent thing for the red flag law, but when you have a homicide and then a suicide, that's permanent. There's no coming back from that. There's no, there's no exercise of rights by anybody on this now. They're dead.
Red flag doesn't have to be a black mark.
No,
Okay.
it does not.
All right.
It does not.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. We covered some ground today, as we usually do, and it was a very tough topic, and I hope that people, feel more confident about our community and saying something and speaking up when they have concerns and knowing who to call. So.
Well, and I would just encourage, parents, talk with your children about these things. It's not that difficult of a conversation, be it about drugs, firearm safety, good decision making, all those things. We're coming up on graduation here in about another, a month and a little bit of time. We all remember what it was like to be young and invincible and graduating high school top of the world. Make sure your children are armed and prepared to survive and live on to the wiser years, I guess is the way to say it, maybe. But just take care of those things. And again, encourage the public. We finally have some nice warm weather and stuff, so please be alert when driving. Vehicles, pedestrians, all of the things above. It's that time of the year. Kids are out and they've been cooped up like the rest of us. They're trying to have fun, not paying attention to things.
I'd just like to say, we're going through some tough times right now with all these deaths and what happened last weekend, and it's been pretty tough on a lot of families. We will get through this. There's some happy times coming. We'll get through it all. Keep your heads up. If you have a friend or a loved one that's got some issues you think about, please feel free to call us. Do not hesitate. We can help those individuals before something worse goes wrong. That's what we're there for, to help out. That's all the chief and I can do is get the deputies and the officers on scene and deal with that individual and see where we go from there. But keep your heads up. Summer's here, and enjoy it.
Thank you, Sheriff. Sheriff Aitor Narvaiza, and thank you, Chief Trouten.
Thanks,
Thank
Lori.
you, Lori. Always
Absolutely.
appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks.
listeners, for joining us for Elko Live today.